Hey there, how's it going? Christy and Alonso and Ben and Matt here at Breakfast All Day. We're talking about a documentary which has been out for about a week now, I want to say, called Knock Down the House. You can watch it on Netflix, and Ben's going to tell you about it.
Yeah, so this is a Netflix doc about four women sort of chosen by progressive grassroots, limitedly funded organizations to challenge incumbent Democrats in the 2018 primary to knock down the House and sort of take back the House. And these four candidates all arguing the same idea of, hey, I get it, there's an establishment Democrat here who has power, sometimes great power, like Joe Crowley in the 14th District of New York, the fourth highest ranking Democrat in the House.
But what have they done for you lately?
What has that
Not
power
anymore.
meant for people in the district? And there's a pretty powerful argument that very little is the answer to that question. So among the four is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She obviously the most famous, but the others they follow are Paula Swearengin, who ran against Joe Manchin in the Democratic primary for the Senate seat in West Virginia. And then two other House candidates, Cori in the 1st District in Missouri and St. Louis, and then Amy Vilela in Nevada. The stories don't all end the same way, but the stories are all compelling, though no question the star of the movie is AOC.
Right. So, Ben, you clearly knew a lot about this already. What did you guys know, Alonso and Matt? What did you guys know about everybody going? Of course, AOC is famous, but did you know about the other ladies as well?
I knew the names, and I knew about the efforts of people like Justice Democrats and stuff to sort of primary incumbents who were not progressive. I learned a lot about the sort of the granular details of those campaigns and the ideas behind them. And I have to say, I admire the filmmakers for not deciding in the editing process, screw it, we're just going to make this a movie about AOC and hooray, like they kept the focus on the four, which I think all of those stories bring a different aspect to it.
Right. They all have very different reasons for running. They all have very districts that they are running in. They all have very different backgrounds. The trick with a movie like this, of course, a documentary like this, where you know the outcome, is how do you make that suspenseful? And they do a really good job of that because you are in the trenches with them. You are there for every door they knock on. You're there for the rallies and for spray painting their own posters, and you come to really, really care about them to the extent that you get so wrapped up in it that maybe you forget, oh, wait, what happened here? Or if you don't forget necessarily, you're so engaged and so ensconced that you really care.
Yeah, and because it's the emotional ride that these four women are on feels so intense that even toward the end, and you obviously know that AOC wins, you are so eager and ready for that cathartic moment when you are going to get to celebrate it with her, and so I was watching with my wife, and she doesn't know, when does she find out? When does she find out? When does she find out? And it is a very, it is a thrilling, cathartic moment. Rachel Lears produced this with her producing partner, who's her husband, Robin Blotnick, and they started this in the spring, in March or April of 2017.
Wow.
So these primaries then happened more than a year later, generally in the summer, late spring or summer of 2018, leading up to the general election in November. So, there's just a huge commitment. They must have shot so many, I imagine, different candidates.
And they're in 4 different parts of the country.
That's right. They're in 4 different parts of the country.
Yeah, I'm sure there's probably I'm sure they had like a list that kept shrinking and shrinking, and who knows? I don't know if they shot 6 and then kept 4 or what the process was, but yeah. And for a movie that was like these campaigns, very sort of seat of their pants, crowdsourced. They did not have any big backers. This movie premiered at Sundance, and then Netflix bought it. So it wasn't like they had Netflix's deep pockets, bankrolling this thing all the way. So yeah. Just the fact that it got made at all is, its own kind of brand of grit that is reflected in the women that are being, profiled here.
Yeah, and again, very different parts of the country, and therefore very different needs in the community, very different motivations. Amy Vilela's story is good from the start, but then it really becomes quite heartbreaking later. That is the one story I did not know. I merely knew her name. I knew nothing of her of her personal story. Cori Bush, there were huge expectations for it, Justice Democrats, and it proved insurmountable with not just an incumbent, but an incumbent whose father, I think William Clay was the father, Lacey Clay, the current incumbent.
It was a dynasty.
Yeah, family dynasty that's just, and as they get somebody in that movie said, man, we pull the Clay lever here in this district. If shows you just what we're up against. And Joe Crowley, who AOC ran against in the Bronx and Queens in New York, he'd never been primaried, and there is no. He'd been given the nomination without a vote, sort of appointed to be the nominee. Then there's no primary. And it's an 85% Democratic district. Joe Crowley had become the fourth most powerful person in the House, thought of as a perhaps logical person to skip over Jim Clyburn and Steny Hoyer to replace Nancy Pelosi as Speaker if she had not been elected Speaker or chosen not to be, or resigned her seat, all of which was under consideration at times. The guy had never won an election. He never competed in an election.
Well, he never had to raise money.
I mean, he won, but it was never a race. Never had to raise money.
And he takes this so blithely that at the first debate with AOC, he doesn't even show up.
Yeah, he
sends like a surrogate, like somebody from like the city council or something.
Yeah, some poor woman who did not know what she was stepping into.
It's also, I mean, of course, AOC is so social media savvy that we've seen a lot of it online. But if you didn't follow her journey the whole way, like to see her before she was, known as an acronym, to see her, shoveling ice at the bar where she was working, and then her little bitty apartment with her boyfriend. And so it's sort of fun to see like who they were before, or who she was before she became a superstar.
I have no doubt that the right will find a way to mock her for this. But one of the criticisms of her, ridiculous criticisms of her over the last few months, has been that she's a manufactured candidate picked by a bunch picked by a bunch of like elites, like these these are the least elite.
Yeah, because the elites didn't want Crowley to stay there.
So you cannot watch this and think that she is not the smartest person in the room in every conversation she's in, and that she is not a sort of a fully formed. These ideas are not hers.
Even Pelosi tried to say like, a glass of water could get elected as a Democrat in that district. Well, yeah, but could they defeat?
Well, right, that's what had been happening.
Yeah, right. And no, the point is that she beat Joe Crowley, not that she won the seat after she beat Joe Crowley. And Nancy Pelosi knows that, so that was obviously a disingenuous thing to say.
Yeah, it moves really well. It gets its arms around all four of these stories in a way that's efficient, and yet you feel satisfied that you really have gotten to know these women and what drives them. I wonder if the other three will run again. I hope so.
I think the ultimate message of all this is like, this time we got one in, and next time maybe we'll get two in or three. And so I feel like this is not just a portrait of these four specific candidates, but of the beginning of what I hope becomes more of a wave of like, untraditional candidates who are smart and heartfelt and, backing the things that people really care about and aren't just part of the machine and, propped up by PACs and corporate donors.
America will be a better place if Amy Vilela, Paula Jean Swearengin, Cori Bush, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are in Congress. Doesn't mean that everything they say is going to pass. In fact, it won't, right? Or at least not in the current climate that we're in. But politics, first of all, it's a great movie to see just to understand sort of retail politics. But I often think about politics and decisions made. Who's at the table? Who's in the decision-making room making the argument, right? And
who's in the room where it happens?
Who's in the room where it happens? But I mean, and if and the people in that room,
which insurance company wrote this legislation?
Right. If it's just the insurance company, and then people who, if we don't have an advocate fighting for Medicare for all in the room, well, then you're not going to get close to it, right? You have to have advocates for regular people in that room with power. And so we are clearly, things have changed in the last 5 years. And I obviously, like Alonso, hope we continue to head in that direction. The country would be better for it, even if none of those policies get adopted.
Yeah, it's very inspiring. And I cried. I sat on the couch with tears streaming down my face when she realizes that she's won. And then when she goes to the Capitol with her boyfriend and they're riding their little scooters around, it's so lovely and so innocent and so hopeful.
Somebody said that she and her boyfriend are the real life Charlize Theron and Seth Rogen.
That's cute. Anyway, I said 8. It's pretty great.
I also said 8. I really enjoyed this film.
I think I said 8.6.
You did. Yeah. So our number is at 8.2. It's at 100% on the tomato meter. And
you have to be incredible. You don't have to like her, but you have to be super cynical to not see the value in a documentary like this.
Yeah, it's very informative.
Even if none of these people are your political cup of tea, I think for, like you were saying, the sort of the sausage making process of how elections work, it's informative and interesting in that way. And maybe you'll want to send your own candidate that way. I don't know, whatever.
You can watch it right now on Netflix.
You can, and you can like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can follow us at BeFastAllDay on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and go check out patreon.com/BeFastAllDay. That's where you will find our TV recaps, including Game of Thrones and Fosse Verdon. We talk about trailers. We're going to be doing some classic movie reviews and other fun stuff. So subscribe today. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.